Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the new moon or Amavasya that's happening on 27th of April, 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. And it seems like the theme for this moment in time is a new leader is chosen. So let's take a look. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. If you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish are my videos. All my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists, so that different videos are, easy to find and on different topics. So, like I have a planets grahas playlist, a houses bhavas playlist, a yoga's planetary combinations playlist, and there are others. Also, if you like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts, I just posted an updated video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2025. And in that video, I list all the famous birth charts I've analyzed on the channel, and the video you can find them in. So whether it's famous people, places, or moments in time. So again, if you're looking for famous charts, I would check out that video. And it looks like I'll be updating that every year, so that's pretty fresh for you. Also, if you've been following along but maybe missed a teaching video or two, the last three teaching videos I've posted are Shrikant, Srinant, Viranchi yogas, which are spiritual combinations, in Libra constellation or Tula rashi, and then mantras for the sun or Surya. And if you're a complete newbie and you're like, oh, where do I get started? Well, I've listed some videos here at the end of the slide that you can start with. I would say that these are important foundational, concepts to learn if you want to get more into Vedic astrology. Okay, so let's take a look at the chart here. So this moment in time of the new moon, 27th April 2025, 15:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's New York time. That's the time zone I live in. Okay. So uh, what we'll see here is that there actually aren't, when we look at the planets that are currently active or most influential right now, there aren't that many of them. Sometimes we can have a gaggle of planets, but you'll see that it's pretty focused here. So the day lord is Sun, okay, and you can see Sun is exalted here in the ninth house. Okay, so Sun is very strong. The thing though is that it's a little bit of a mixed bag because Sun is strong by position, but the thing is, Sun is also, when we have Sun in the ninth house, that's called a karako bhavanasha. Karako bhavanasha indicates that there are issues with actually ninth house related things, especially people. So people related to Sun and the ninth house, overlapping there. One, the first thing that comes to mind is father, because Sun represents father, ninth house represents father. Also, the ninth house and Sun potentially can indicate like a guru. It could also indicate a leader, especially of an institution or organization or government. Okay. So we've got that just starting off. And the Hora Lord or our Lord is Mercury. Okay, Mercury is in the 8th house down here, where we can see that circle, kind of pink circle surrounding Venus, Rahu, Saturn, Mercury. Those four planets together in the 8th house, we call it a pravraya yoga. That's a life focus yoga. Okay, so Mercury's in there, and Mercury's debilitated. However, it's helped a bit because it's with Venus, which is in its exaltation sign. So we call that nicca bhanga, when the debilitated planet is helped by by various means to pull it up to some degree out of its debilitation status. Okay. And Mercury represents things like education, discussion, communication. So between the Sun and Mercury, so far, we've got leader, which is pretty prominent and evident because Sun exalted in the ninth house. It's the first thing you would think. And then Mercury discussion. So there's a discussion about leadership here. Okay. Especially because Mercury is not only in this pravraya yoga in the ninth or eighth house, which is also the house of deep psychology and thoughts and research. Okay, so there's a lot of churning here, mental churning here going on. And then Mercury is aspecting the second house, where currently in this chart, at least it owns. So Mercury is what we call in swa position, or sort of swa position, not exactly swa position, but Mercury aspecting into its own house kind of creates like a swa-like energy in that house, okay, not for the overall chart. But the second house represents oral communication. So we have a communication planet very strong in the second house. The other thing is that we have parivartana yoga. So parivartana yoga exists in this chart between Jupiter and Venus. Okay, Jupiter is in a sign of Venus in Taurus in the 10th house. Venus is in the sign of Pisces in the 8th house here. So because they're in each other's houses, you can essentially swap them. So that brings Jupiter into the mix in the 8th house of, again, more thoughts and more research and more mental churning. But then you have both Jupiter and Mercury aspecting the second house, and Jupiter and Mercury are the two communication planets. So, and especially Jupiter, more so than Mercury even, is about oral communication. Okay, so a lot of discussion going on here. A lot of sorting through both mentally, well, actually physically, well, mentally as well. But physically, because the second house is ruled by Virgo, which is a dual earth sign. And then Pisces is a dual water sign. So it's both an emotional churning, kind of sorting through, as well as a practical sorting through, tangible sorting through things. Okay. But then the dasha period is the planetary period. So these are the planets that are the most kind of, again, active or influential at this moment in time. And you can see we're pretty solidly set in Venus because it's Venus, 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 Saturn. So Venus is the Mahadasha main planetary period. Venus is the Bhukti or sub-period. Venus is the Antara, so the kind of tertiary period. And then we have a little bit of Saturn here in the Shukshma, so sub period, yes. Okay, three subs, third sub-period. So and Saturn, you can see, is also in this mix of this pravraya yoga in the 8th house of thinking and feeling and researching and that sort of thing. Now, the thing is, if you look really close at this chart, you can see that Venus and Saturn, these two planets that we're talking about with the dasha period, are in the same degree. Just barely. I mean, within a few hours of this moment in time, actually, Venus will be moving out of that 1 degree sameness with Saturn. Okay. But when you have planets like Venus and Saturn in the same degree, that's called a planetary war or graha. So what that does, it means that there's like some sort of battle going on here. And again, it looks like it's deep within the psychology, deep within the emotions as well. Venus is the practical, worldly counselor, and Saturn is tradition. Okay. And the thing is, at this point also, and the thing is, when you have planets in planetary war, that destabilizes both of those planets and the houses that they own. So in this chart, Venus owns the 3rd house of nonverbal communication, so we're getting communication again, as well as siblings, as well as neighbors. And it also owns the 10th house of daily activity. So there's some sort of battle going on, in those houses. And then Saturn in this chart owns the 6th house of acute problems and enemies. And it also owns the 7th house of spouse-like partner, independent business, but also like a way in life, path forward in life. Okay, so those two planets are in war. Venus at this point is in a nakshatra or lunar mansion called Uttar. So Uttar is symbolized by the back legs of a funeral pyre. So, smoke and fumes, cremation, things turning to dust. But with the back legs of a funeral pyre, that nakshatra, again, nakshatras, if you're not familiar, lunar mansions, there are about 27 of them. Every night the moon passes through a different one. They all have different energies. And after the moon passes through 27 nakshatras, you get a lunar month. Okay. So this Uttar energy is not just the cremation, transformation and destruction part of it that is involved, But with the back legs of the funeral pyre, it's like starting to step into a more objective stance, or a surrendering stance to the chaos that's going on. Okay. And again, Venus is a worldly counselor, so this is just sort of practical advice of like, how do we create order out of chaos, essentially, with Venus. Okay. Now Saturn is in Purva Bhadrapada. Those are the front legs of the funeral pyre, and that's just like, again, the destructive element of, a funeral pyre. So smoke, flames, very intense. And Saturn, though, within a few hours of this moment in time, will be moving into into Uttar Bhadrapada. So Saturn will be gaining objectivity here. Okay. Now Saturn, on its own as a planet, represents things like delays, obstacles, anxiety, depression, skepticism, doubts, death, destruction, and it's in that, again, Purva Bhadrapada nakshatra. So Saturn has really done a number here, okay? And again, it's going up against Venus, which is great, a great natural benefic here. So these two forces, these two energies have been up against each other, and this is not the first planetary war. This is the second planetary war they've been in the last month, because Venus went retrograde, went backwards over Saturn and Rahu here. When Rahu is also like in the Purva Bhadrapada energy, so we have two planets here, two natural malefic planets in this Purva Bhadrapada cremation energy. Venus went back over them, okay, almost to the very end of Pisces. So these three were all in the same degree, but like even more unstable because they were in the first degree of Pisces, what we call Sunday position. And then Venus went progressive, last week, and so now Venus is like going back over on Saturn, and we'll be clearing this, basically, momentarily after this moment in time. And this has been causing a lot of issues. This kind of knot of planets has been causing a lot of issues over the last month. Okay. So, again, we have Sun, a little bit of Mercury here in terms of planetary energy, Venus, 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 Saturn, and then Venus, 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 Saturn turns to Venus, Venus, Sun on July 6th, 2025. Okay, so, so we're picking up more of the Sun energy again. Okay, so it looks like this Venus-Saturn planetary war, in the Bhadrapada nakshatras, pravraya, there's a focus here of thinking, deciding, feeling, researching, and all of this pravraya, even though I've circled these planets in the 8th house, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, and Jupiter are, again, aspect in the 2nd house as well. So, family, besides oral communication, the 2nd house represents family, inner circle. Okay, so a lot of discussion, thinking, sorting, researching, and then again about the Sun here. So about leadership here. Again, it could literally be father, it could be guru, or it could be a spiritual or institutional head. A leader. Looks like. Okay. So immediately when I saw this, I mean, what seems like the obvious example in the world right now is the Pope actually passed away just a few days ago. What is it, April 21st, Easter Monday. And so there's a whole long ancient tradition about how to choose a new Pope. It's something, again, I don't know all the details, but just what I was reading about it, it's some sort of secret conclave. So there are cardinals all around, the Catholic cardinals all around the world. They get together physically in the Vatican, and then they take away all their, communication devices with the outside world. They kind of lock them in, so to speak. And they have this process where there's discussion and there's voting, and you need to be under, I guess, 80 years of age to, was it either vote or be eligible to be voted for, to become the new pope. And apparently through history, sometimes this process, and what they do is like, apparently somebody needs like 90 votes in order to become the pope. So they go through different rounds of voting. And sometimes this process has lasted weeks, if not months. Okay. This typically starts to occur. It's changed apparently, but in the past, it was usually 15 to 20 days after a pope had died. The conclave meets and starts their process, secretive, locked in process. Um, and so again, that's the first immediate example that I saw of this going on. The other thing is like, when we're talking about, well, I'll get to that point, but like, this doesn't, this isn't necessarily all of us. I also, it's, interesting too. Like, I also have a friend, a personal friend who's a professor, head of her department. And I thought it was interesting too that she's been head of her department for several years now. I don't know, maybe 6. I don't know exactly how many, but she's actually stepping down and they're choosing a new leader for her department. And so they will also be going through, not exactly the same as a Catholic Church, that's a much kind of global level of this, but, in her own world, this will be going on in terms of, a lot of thought and discussion going on in terms of choosing a new leader of an institution. Okay. Um, yeah, so the Lugna Nakshatra is Purva Falguni, which has a lot of creative energy to it. Purva Falguni is symbolized by usually a hammock or a marital bed, so there's usually a lot of positive energy associated with it, like finer things of life and marital harmony and relationships and socializing and stuff like that. The thing though is that there is potentially also spiritual energy associated with Purva Falguni. Because another alternative symbol for Purva Falguni is a Shiva lingam. Okay, and so that is about bringing Shiva as the god of destruction in Hindu lore. So there can be like a spiritualizing of a creative process here. Because sometimes what you get when you have a lot of strong placements in Port Falgunis, you might get somebody who's like a creative artist of some kind. But then, if you have indications of spirituality, and in this chart, I believe we do, because what we're looking at the top of the chart here, the top diamond in the middle, that's the rising sign, also known as the Lugna in Sanskrit, or ascendant, rising, first house. These are all different names for the same thing. And you can see that little 5 in the bottom corner. That 5 indicates the 5th zodiac sign of Leo, or Simha in Sanskrit. And Leo is ruled by the sun. So the ruling planet of this whole chart is the sun that's exalted in the 9th house. So when you have, again, and there are no other planets or aspects into Leo here in this chart, that takes basically, even though we're looking at a Leo Lugna here, which also tends to indicate leadership, um, you know, we have this sun, really strong sun, exalted sun, going to the 9th house of religion and spirituality. So there is a creative process, however it was determined decades or centuries ago, even centuries ago, really, of this process, at least with the Pope, choosing a new Pope. But there is a spiritualization of it. Okay. Then we see the nakshatras for the moon and the sun, since they're in the same degree here. They're both in the nakshatra of Bharani. Bharani is symbolized by a womb, so that indicates like cycles of birth and death, literally. Okay, so especially when you have the sun exalted here, that's probably gonna bring like a more of the birth um, end of the cycle more than the death types, although there's both included. But this you can see is that there's a new leader emerging here. Because the sun not only represents father and guru and head or whatever, but can be like president or king, which essentially the Pope is the highest echelon of leadership in the Catholic Church. Okay. And the moon is also in Bharani. The moon represents the emotions and the intuitive mind, the nurturing. It also represents the public. So with moon being in Bharani, that brings more of this kind of, again, creative cycling energy, because the moon is always like cycling into different phases. It's the fastest moving planet, of them all, of the 9 classic Jyotish planets. But the moon also represents the public. So this is about like supporting and nurturing a new leader of a new institution. Again, maybe the Pope, maybe something else. But also like starting a new mental cycle, like having to start, instead of the Pope who just passed away, Pope Francis. It's like you have to kind of wrap your mind around the new leadership that steps in to take his place. Okay. So, yeah, the context here, I wrote a little bit. So Venus and Saturn, again, there's a planetary war going on, although it's just about over at this point. And within a few hours, both of the planets, Venus and Saturn, are going to be in uccha drop. And again, bringing objectivity, bringing surrender, bringing order to the chaos that's gone on with an event like that. The other thing to know is that, this whole chart is going to change significantly within a few weeks here, because Jupiter is transiting to Gemini, so Jupiter is moving to the 11th house here, and that'll break the parivartana exchange of houses between Jupiter and Venus, which is actually creating a lot of support around the moon and the sun. And the moon also represents the queen, so the moon and the sun here are the two regents. It's like the throne, not just sort of the male, sort of masculine energy version, but the feminine energy version of that as well. Right? Both, the whole kind of, not just the king or the queen, but, because sometimes power can shift to the other one, depending on your circumstances or the rules of your, society or your, institution or whatever. But this is like reestablishing from the top a whole new leadership. Now, with Jupiter and Venus on either side of the moon and the sun, that's going to be a lot of, because those are the two natural benefic planets, greatest natural benefic planets. They're going to be supporting the moon and supporting the sun. And also in that position, they create what's called Shubha Kartari Yoga. So that's a planetary combination, special planetary combination. Shubh means good and Kartari means scissors. So it's like a good scissors combination around this moon, sun, exalted sun in the 9th house stuff going on. And a Shubh Kartari Yoga, what that's going to do is it's going to cut through obstacles and basically support and protect this moon sun combination in the 9th house. Now again, sun is karako bhava nasha, so there's still issues and problems here. But it's nice to have this Jupiter and Venus surrounding the moon and the sun to support them individually, but then again, through that special aspect, special feature of a Shubhakartra Yoga. Okay, so again, once Jupiter moves into Gemini, we're going to lose both the Parivartana Yoga, which is supportive, and we're also going to lose the Shubhakartra Yoga here. And then also, a few days after that, on May 18th, Rahu and Ketu are transiting. So Rahu is going to back up into the 7th house here, and Ketu is going to be in Leo. Okay, so we're not, again, in this particular moment in this chart, we're not running those planets currently. But yeah, that's going to bring a lot of like Rahu and Ketu. Rahu's the north node of the moon, Ketu's the south node of the moon. That's going to bring a lot of hidden, unusual, unexpected energy. And to some degree, again, depending on when, especially the papal conclave starts and finishes their process, these transits may be happening in the middle of it. Okay, so especially like, and you can see Rahu and Ketu, they're in the almost, last degree. I mean, just by 6 minutes, I mean, within a day or two, they're going to be in the last degree. That's going to make them both Sunday. So again, it's going to bring instability to both those planets. And they already bring planets of, again, hidden energy, unexpected energy, surprising energy. Rahu brings ambition. So you can see that, Rahu's sliding towards Aquarius in the 7th house here. It's bringing that kind of energy with, and probably it's already being felt and experienced on some level. because we're so close to those changes. And then Saturn actually, because Saturn you can see is in the 3rd degree, 18 minutes of Pisces here. Saturn just switched signs March 29th. So we've had Saturn in Pisces for only a month now. Saturn's going to stay in Pisces for almost 3 years. I mean, there's going to be a little retrograde, there's going to be a little movement into Aries, and it's going to retrograde back. And then, so almost 3 years, Saturn's going to, I think until February 2028, Saturn's going to be in Pisces here. Okay, so again, not just for this chart, but for all Leos or Simha Rashi people. Yeah. So the game board is changing here. Because Jupiter changes signs only 1 year every year. Rahu and Ketu change signs only a year and a half, and Saturn only changes signs about every 2.5 years. So when you get all 4 of the slowest moving planets changing within about 6 weeks of each other, that means that the whole game board, like our energy, our focus, our direction, our drive, is going to shift dramatically for all of us. Okay. So again, here in this particular chart, it looks like probably this process will be concluded around the time of May 18th. Well, actually 14th to 18th, it'll probably be finished. So again, I haven't done charts for the Pope or the Vatican or any of that, but for generally for collective energy, whatever discussion and selection process is going on here of electing or choosing a new leader, it'll probably again be mostly finished by middle of May. And who else is on board? Oh, like Canada actually. I mean, they have an election. They have kind of a pushed election coming up. Was that today, tomorrow? 28th, soon. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Yeah, so, Canada as a country is basically going through this as well. So you can see, like, whether it's a global religious diaspora or a nation or a individual, you can see how this energy is playing out. And for all of us, wherever Leo is in our chart, this process is going on around Leo. Whichever house Leo is in for us. So you can think about it that way as well. Okay, so that's just kind of starting off with some energies, basic energies here, and I'll go through house by house. So I mentioned we have a Leo or Simha rising chart here. And if you're not familiar, this is a North Indian style chart. I use North Indian style charts in my work. So again, there are 12 houses at the top. This top diamond in the middle. This is the first house, rising sign, ascendant, lugna, all different names for the same thing. To get to the other houses, you count counterclockwise. So the second house is this upside down triangle in the top left corner with the 6 in the bottom corner. That 6 in the bottom corner refers to the 6th zodiac sign of Virgo or Kanya in Sanskrit. Okay. So we have a Leo or Simha rising chart here. And I do have a video on that if you want to get deep into that. But Leo is a fixed fire sign or Sthira Agni. Okay. So whenever you have fire sign, there's a lot of action, and fixed means there's like steady, constant action. Okay. Somebody who doesn't really change their way of doing things. Okay. So again, if we're talking about something like, Papal Enclave, they've been doing it that way, and I don't know if there are going to be many changes, but they've been doing it, I think, since like the 12th century or something. I mean, centuries they've been doing it this way, with their secretive, locked in a room almost, and kind of hashing things out. And again, Leo in general tends to indicate leadership, not always, but especially in a chart like this with Sun exalted in the 9th house, I would say, oh yeah, definitely. The other thing is Leo tends to represent a stage or a high level of activity. And so again, if we're talking about things like a department chairship or a pope or a prime minister of a nation, again, those are all high levels, right? Leo also tends to indicate creativity, especially when we're looking at the Purva Falguni energy, right? Hammock energy. But it's spiritualized because, again, of placement of the ruling planet of the chart, which again is this exalted sun on the ninth house. So the Lagnesha again is this exalted karako bhava nasha sun, and it's with a new moon. Both of these are in Bharani, that womb, right? Cycling, life and death energy here. There's a turning over here of leadership. And the thing is, though, it's also interesting. Not only do we have a parivartana exchange of houses between Jupiter and Venus, but we also have an exchange of houses between Mars and Moon. So Jupiter and Venus are all over the chart, and Mars and Moon are all over the chart. Mars, Venus, and Moon are passion planets, so there's a lot of energy here. Jupiter and Venus are the two advisor planets. Jupiter's more of a spiritual advisor, Venus is more of a worldly advisor. Mars is about innovation and action. Rebelliousness can be, and Moon is public and emotions. Venus and Moon are both emotional planets. So, and Mars and Jupiter together tend to represent law. So we have uh, emotional, practical, spiritual, law, public, a lot of that energy swirling around the chart. So we have the sun exalted in the ninth house with the new moon. And then the thing though is Mars is debilitated in the 12th house. The 12th house indicates things like losses, expenditures, but also foreign remote places like you could see like an international global reach. So that's why again I kept thinking about the Pope and the decision-making process for choosing a new Catholic Church leader. So Mars is debilitated here, but luckily Mars is in a nakshatra called Pusha. Pusha is symbolized by a cow's udder, so that's like about creating physical, mental, emotional stability. So Mars being debilitated, Mars is an action planet, it's debilitated, so it's kind of like on its own would symbolize like kind of an erratic energy. But with Mars coming back to its own house of the ninth house here, then what you have is you have Mars in its own house of Aries, so which is a movable fire sign, a lot of action, and you have an exalted sun here, and you have the new moon. So you have the two fire planets, Mars and Sun, two leadership planets, because Sun is the president, Mars is like the commander in chief of the army, that kind of energy. Or you could think of it as Sun as president, Mars is like the CEO. Mars is more of the hands-on, roll up your sleeve, hands-on in the trenches type of leadership. Sun can be more of a figurehead. But there's all this fire going on in the ninth house, a lot of action, a lot of activity going on here. So again, even more leadership energy. That's also going to make this ninth house super strong. So, again, if this was a person's chart, not just like a moment in time or transit chart, I would assume this person is in charge of something, no doubt. And probably also like almost like a workaholic, because with this much like a movable fire sign, exalted sun, and Swa, Mars and its own, this is somebody who will not stop. It's just going to be like, working, working, work. I mean, total worker horse, is what's going on here. So, yeah, and then again, they will be bringing some instability, some stability, or at least trying to bring some stability to whatever this transition period has brought, in terms of disorder or chaos or whatever. Yeah. So, yeah. And then this, this Sun Mars combination with Moon again. It's physical, it's mental, emotional, like it's on every level. This is a very big thing going on here. And this ninth house, again, I mentioned, represents father, religion, government, boss, guru, also satsang, so spiritual community. So this could be like a leader of a spiritual community, excuse me, or other institution, so yeah, with all this, it's like we've put this all together, stepping into new leadership, but there are issues here. And this could be, again, with all this fire too, there can be aggression and competition, maybe quite rigid as well. Um, some attempt at maybe unstable actions, attempting to nurture losses or remote and overseas energy. And then we've got some yogas. Some of them I've already mentioned. Kartari, so that's Jupiter and Venus on flanking the moon and the sun. So at least there's a kartari around this ninth house, so that should help cut through whatever pushback there is to the situation or process. Then we have Shubha-Bhayachari. That's Jupiter and Venus on either side of the sun. That's going to support the sun. Duradhara, that's Jupiter and Venus on either side of the moon. We have a chandra-mangala yoga here, because the position of Mars and Chandra is moon and Mangala is Mars. So their position from each other brings chandra-mangala yoga. That's a wealth yoga. Yeah, you can also see that there's quite a bit of wealth in this, chart as well. Because Mercury here, which we started off like Hurrah Lord Mercury. Mercury is the lord of the 11th house of income and also clubs, group societies. And Mercury is also the lord of the second house of assets. So, this Mercury, like part of this, it's kind of interesting because Jupiter's involved for sure, but I would say that, especially because we're running so much Venus here, despite the spiritual indications, this is probably going to be more of a practical decision in terms of, who can actually get the job done. You know what I mean? Like, even as far as the Pope is concerned, even though he's a spiritual leader of the Catholic Church and that whole diaspora around the world, I mean, the last Pope was involved with, like, rectifying financial issues with the Vatican and all this very practical matters. So it's not just, him pontificating, spiritual ideas. I mean, there's a lot of practical, things that have to be done. The other thing is, as far as the Vatican's concerned, I mean, that's a very wealthy church. There's a lot of assets that need to be managed and managed properly. Um, and so, yeah, they have to have those practical skills as well as the spiritual skills to be able to do this. And it actually looks like it's tipping a little bit more towards more of the practical side, of somebody needing like really strong management leadership skills to do that job. And again, it's also about deciding like where these assets are going. And the assets are not just like monetary, like, physical assets or investment portfolio, which are all probably true for the Pope and the Pope's position. But, again, Mercury is the owner ruler of the 11th house of clubs, groups, and society. Because again, all of that money is coming from, people donating, you know, to the church. A lot of it is. So, without a constituency, there is no church really, and there's no wealth for the church. So it all goes together. Um, so let's see what else. So we have a Chandra-mangala yoga. So again, that's picking up that wealth combination. Did I write it down? No, hopefully I remember to include it. But there is also indications here of maybe a Lakshmi yoga. So a Lakshmi yoga, that's where there are a couple different formations of it. But when you have the ninth lord that's strong, and it doesn't seem like the ninth lord is that strong because Mars is debilitated in the 12th house. The thing is, through parivartana, Mars comes back to its own house. And then you have this massively strong ninth house. Okay, so, there can be a Lakshmi-like yoga, and Lakshmi can indicate great wealth. I mean, Chandra-mangala yoga is wealth, but not at the level. Lakshmi yoga is like another echelon, a higher level of wealth, typically. And then the other thing you would look at is first you would see if the ninth lord was strong. Through this, just because of this parivartana, there's strength here. If in a day the moon's going to be in what is it, Taurus, and then you're going to lose this Chandra-mangala yoga, and then Mars will not be in the middle of this. Okay. Um, but what's the other thing is, and the moon won't be back here for another month. Okay. But this also at this time means that we also look at the lugna or at the lugnacha, like the strength of the first house. That's another way. That's another criteria for determining a Lakshmi yoga. And again, sun is exalted here. So it's Close. There's a lot of, I think, Lakshmi-like yoga here, even if it's not technically just a very clean Lakshmi yoga. I do feel like Lakshmi yoga exists in this chart. Yeah, and then also you have a Kala Sarpa yoga, so that's all the planets on one side of the Rahu K2 axis. So that brings unusual energy as well as ambition. And I do believe you also have a Sri Kanth yoga here. So Sri Kanth is one of the spiritual yogas. So one version of well, the way you determine the Sri Kanth yoga is you look at the strength of the sun, which is exalted. You look at the strength of the moon, which here is, it's a new moon, and this by itself doesn't look like a very strong moon. But when you do the parivartana between Mars and moon, moon goes to back to its own sign, but it is in the 12th house. So this moon is not as strong, but at least it's swa, it's in its own house. So sun definitely strong, moon strong through parivartana, and then the thing is you look at the lugna again, and again the lugna is very strong. So the lugna and sun super strong, and moon is strong through parivartana. So I think that does bring straight Kantha energy, which again is a spiritual yoga. So we do keep getting filtered into this mix, spiritual energy, because of the placements in the 9th house, because of the Purva Falguni, rising nakshatra, because of the potential Sri Kant yoga. Also, even these, these planets down here in Purva Bhadrapada and Uttara Bhadrapada, I mean, that sounds pretty, not great, but especially once Venus and Saturn are moving in Uttara Bhadrapada, that can almost indicate like when you take a step back and you're not so attached and you surrender spiritually to something or some process or event in life or circumstance, and sometimes we even like surrender to life itself. This can indicate to some degree, like almost like a, not to mix different religions and, philosophies or whatever, but almost like a reincarnation type energy. Like, what's the next version? Especially because we also have moon and sun and in Bharani, there's a cycling going on here. Yeah. So yeah, a lot going on. And then when we have all these yogas, they're going to bring a lot of power, and also things like somebody being well spoken, liked, valiant, relief from obstacles, ambition, spirituality, wealth, a lot of stuff. And the chidra grahas, these are planets of vulnerability. These can be planets that indicate, like the things that they symbolize can be things that like are kind of a sensitive spot or like a sore sensitive, like Achilles heel point for people. And we have Saturn here. So again, that's that tradition. Saturn represents tradition and antiquity. Jupiter can represent children. It can also represent, especially in this chart, because Jupiter is the lord of the 5th house, which represents children. Besides, on its own as a planet, represents children. So Jupiter is like giving more weight to the 5th house. So the condition and placement of Jupiter is really important for, any sort of um, issues related to children. And it may not just be like biological children, but again, if we're talking about some high level office like the popeship or something like that, we're talking about all the followers, religious followers and generations, like future generations, up and coming generations, right? Because this tradition of this institution has lasted centuries. So even on that level, and then Mars twice over. So again, leadership is involved here and bringing mental, emotional, physical strength and stability to the leadership, but also around the world because Mars is there and it's debilitated in the 12th house. But when you bring Moon into its own sign in the 12th house, that's going to bring some protection. And again, Moon represents the public and emotions, right? Yeah. So, then I have planets related to wealth. So the Yogi, which is a planet indicating wealth, is K2, and K2 is here in the 2nd house of assets. So, we're not running K2 right now, but, it's sitting there right there in the 2nd house. Then the Avi Yogi is Rahu. Rahu is going to be moving into the 11th house here. That might indicate, like, if this was a transit chart for somebody, this might indicate like a downward financial cycle for an independent business or a spouse. Then the duplicate yogi, which again is a planet bringing wealth, is this massive massive sun exalted in the 9th house. and then which is also the ruling planet for the whole chart. So again, we're seeing wealth in multiple layers, multiple ways. There's a lot of confluence for wealth in this chart. The thing that was with Purva Falguni, like right now, and with Venus and Saturn being still in planetary war, but releasing themselves from that, momentarily within hours of this moment in time, this could be a moment of rest before this process takes place. So, like with the popeship, for example, I believe there's public viewing of his body for the next few days. So the cardinals, I guess, are, I don't know, maybe starting to head towards the Vatican, or maybe there's some, it's a little bit of a rest before the formal process of the conclave actually begins there. Yeah. Um. Yeah. The other thing is there might be pageantry. Like that's the word that came to mind. I don't know if that's the best word, but that's the word that came to mind because you're going to have Jupiter in the 10th house of daily activity with Venus. When Jupiter and Venus are together, and Venus is in its own sign of Taurus, this could be something like a celebration, which sounds weird, when an important figure is passed on, but you do have Saturn aspecting here as well, and K2 aspecting is here. So when you have Jupiter and Venus together in the 10th house, this could be like some kind of like, frankly, like again, like a celebration or party or parade or something like that. Then when you have K2 and Saturn involved as well, this is like a party of loss, or like a celebration of loss. And typically that's, I think I mentioned that before when I've talked a little bit about other events related to the Catholic Church, is a lot of times when they talk about saints, they actually in some ways seem, I don't know for sure, but it seems like they often identify the date of death as the real, it's almost like the spiritual birthday, because it seems like maybe they're passing on from the physical or mundane world, but they're being born into heaven, like especially like with sainthood and stuff like that. So it's like this sort of odd mix of K2 and Saturn, like destructive and separation energy with Jupiter and Venus. So this could be sort of the, again, parade of people around the world, or, who are going to, the cathedral to honor his life and contributions as head of the, Catholic Church. Not just the leader that's passed, but probably, the leader that's coming up, that's also going to happen. Um, yeah, so what else? So the other thing, besides all this stuff I've talked about so far, the ninth house can also represent higher education, like usually if, like PhD or doctorate level type education. Um, and so when we have Sun exalted here in Bharani with the Moon, that alone, like for me, that brings to mind like OB-GYN, like obstetrics gynecology, because Sun exalted like this and Bharani, again, we're talking about literally the symbol of that is a womb. And Sun as a planet can represent medicine, and Sun exalted, this is a very strong Sun. Sun also represents career. And then we have Moon here. Moon represents women and cycling as well. So that's why, obstetrics. And then with Mars coming in here through parivartana with Moon, Mars can indicate chemistry as well as surgery. So chemistry and surgery related to cycles of women. I mean, that's obstetrics gynecology. There's or medicine again, medicine generally, more specifically OB-GYN, and if not medicine, definitely management, because Mars and Sun are the two, leadership planets. So like MBA type energy or that sort of thing. So yeah, so let's look at the other houses now. So moving on to the second house, we have the second lord is debilitated Mercury, although it's aspecting to its own sign. Mercury's in Revati. Revati's pretty nice. Revati is all about hospitality and traveling. So, again, that could literally be like, these cardinals, if we keep on this line of the Pope, and secretive conclave for deciding the next Pope. This could be like family, the inner circle, these cardinals, if we're talking about the Catholic Church, or family members, inner circle, also clubs, groups, and society traveling to pay their respects, and also to be part of this process here of choosing. So, like in Canada, for example, this would be people going to the polls, you know, and making their selection for who they want to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And then Ketu's there in Uttara Falguni. Uttara Falguni is similar to Purva Falguni, but it has more of like a, enjoyment, creativity, but with a sense of purpose, like a mission. So that's there. And then aspecting exalted planetary war Venus and Uttara Bhadrapada, planetary war Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada, Sandhi Rahu and Uttara Bhadrapada. So discussion about sorting through, because this is all happening in Virgo in the second house. Virgo is a dual earth sign. So again, making a very tangible selection, or sorting through in a very tangible way something. Again, it looks like some new leader here. Also organizing and completing a cycle. Also, let's see, worldwide. Let me just see. I think I was still thinking about, I don't know if I would keep that worldwide. But anyway, so again, there's the sorting through process, and with, Saturn and Rahu, there's this unusual old traditional process, again, like this papal conclave, about acute issues. The reason why acute issues is here is because Saturn, which is in this, gaggle of planets in the 8th house of, long-term deep problems, is the lord of the 6th house of acute issues. So, and again, Saturn is the planet of death, destruction, and it's in the 8th house of death as well. So, again, it looks like there's a problem with letting go of something or someone here. And Saturn is also the lord of the 7th house of, again, forward. So, there's an unusual process here about how to deal with acute disruptions and how to move forward. The thing though is that because of these planets are in the 8th house, I mean, the 8th house is also a place of things that are hidden, like the secretive conclave, also scandals, potentially. So, and, again, research is going on here as well. So, as I mentioned, Jupiter and Mercury, a lot of discussion going on back and forth. Yeah, so let's see about other houses here. So then so all the stuff on the left is the same, just my notes on the right are different for the other houses. So the third house lord is Venus. It's aspected by Mars, which is again in Pusha. There's the new moon aspecting here, exalted sun, both in Bharani. So this is physical communication or nonverbal communication, physical communication regarding a new leader. There's some probably arguments going on, probably not too much of a blowout argument, I don't think, because at least Mars is in Pusha. I mean, if Mars was in Ashlesha, the next nakshatra that comes after it, and Ashlesha is symbolized by a snake. That's a lot different. That's a lot different than a cow's udder. And then Mars again is also supported because Moon is coming into the sign of Cancer where it's debilitated. So that's going to soften Mars a bit. So there will be arguments, but again, hopefully not knockdown blowout fights here. And also, again, there's some loss going on here because Mars, as just the ruler of the 9th house going to the 12th house of loss and expenditure, there is a loss of something related to 9th house issues. And so I was thinking, like, with this 3rd house stuff, again, apparently with the selection of a new pope, there's this process where I guess they take votes at different times. And what happens is when a ballot is cast, if a new leader, if the new leader somebody hasn't received the 90 votes they need to become the new pope, apparently they burn the ballots, and they burn them in such a way that if there's no conclusive leader yet, they will burn so that there's black smoke. And once a pope has actually been chosen, then they burn it somehow so that smoke is white. So there's literally like physical communication between the secret enclave going on of all the cardinals and the public. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And Mars could again be fire. Sun is also fire, and Moon is public. So you have fire, like a fire communication with the public. And let's see. Excuse me. Then the fourth house lord is Mars. It's aspected by Jupiter. Jupiter's in Mrigashirsha, so Mrigashirsha is all about seeking. The symbol of that is a deer's head. So like deers wandering through forests, like seeking things out, seeking a path forward. Jupiter represents law, balance, also finance. And Venus is aspecting here, and Mars is aspecting here. And the fourth house represents lineage. And so with Mars aspecting here, there's like a disruption. Also, Mars represents property, and the fourth house represents property. So there can be a disruption, not just of lineage, but of home and property here. Again, not just if we're trying to, it's just such a big story with the selection of the Pope, and it just fits so well with this. I guess that's why I keep going back to it. But I keep also trying to weave in potential other storylines on a more, individual, mundane level. But yeah, I mean, this could be like disruption of property, disruption of home. Yeah. Loss of property, something deeply transformative though, because the fourth house is Scorpio, so it's a deep transformational energy here. Also, the fourth house is something underground, so this could be like a problem underground. Um, like, what would it be? And Mars represents chemistry and minerals and stuff. This might be like some mining projects or something, or like digging projects that have gone awry. Be. Um, Let's see. Mars is going to the ninth house, aspect Jupiter, Moon. Let's see. Seeking, yeah. So, again, when we're wrapping these planets together, weaving them together, and we have Mars, Jupiter, Moon going on here. Again, that's like seeking public balance and law with the spiritual leader. So, or at least, again, it doesn't have to be spiritual. Again, it could be government, like what's going on in like Canada, or my friend's professor department or whatever, university department. So, in the fifth house here, fifth house lord is Jupiter. It's aspected by Saturn. Well, there's going to bring problems here, because Saturn's in Purva, but probably trying to bring more order here. And again, fifth house stuff is like counseling, children, romance, creativity, and we're looking here at Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a dual fire sign, so it's like, which way do we go? And also Sagittarius can be very philosophical. So it's sort of like, what actions do we take? What philosophy do we choose? So it's again about, choosing things, yeah. Choosing a new direction. Um, and then, or even choosing how to choose is maybe the way to say it, is like, because you have to figure out what your philosophy and values are first before, and know what those are, be clear about those. So you have to choose that first before you choose based on that. So it's several levels of choosing. Um, then the sixth house lord is Saturn. It's gone to the eighth house, aspected by Ketu, Mars, Moon, Jupiter in the sixth house. Again, sixth house is enemies. It's also acute problems. Um, this could be chronic chronic legal, spiritual issues. Also strong competitors. So again, if you have all these cardinals around the world, 100 or so of them, potentially vying for the leadership position as a pope. I mean, that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. So, in the seventh house lord is Saturn, aspected by Mars. Excuse me. So again, there's disruptions here. So end or revival. It could be either way, actually, because again, Saturn is in Purva, so something's ended. But whenever you have something ending, there's always something new that's beginning. So there's like either an end or revival of a partnership, independent business, a partner. Also, like, so if you look at this, if you spin the chart and make the seventh house the first house, then the partner is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn has gone to the second house for the partner, which is material gains, family, inner circle. So while the person of this chart, the Leo person, is very much, I think, in the public sphere, going through that process, it looks like the partner is much more focused on staying close to home and focusing on mundane things, rather than philosophical. So then the eighth house, we've been talking about. Eighth house lord is Jupiter. It aspects its own through parivartana. You've got Venus, Rahu, Saturn, Mercury here. Hidden talks and thoughts, scandals, research, mixed emotions, advising through adversity. These things we've talked about. So that was one thing that kind of popped up, at least in my news feed. I think it was yesterday, where apparently there was some cardinal that was convicted of financial fraud, and there's some controversy as to whether he should participate or not in this secret papal conclave. So I don't know all the details, but I think there's a discussion part of it and then there's a voting part of it. And so I guess the question is like, is he even allowed to participate in the discussion part of it? So if he's allowed to participate in the discussion part, like clearly he's still trying to throw his weight around, his influence around or something, right? So still trying to influence the outcome, even if he's not a candidate for that position. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Again, when I saw these planets in the eighth house, I'm like, okay. And then Sun and karako, I'm like, luckily we have the two great benefics surrounding this. That's going to help a lot, but this is not without, you know, issues, in terms of the process. And then we'll see what comes up with, like Canada. There's probably, I'm guessing, was Canada's charging. Yeah, because I did Canada's chart. Canada's, yeah, it's a Pisces rising, isn't that what it was? Yeah. Yeah, so for Canada, for example, if Pisces is there, like, this is happening in the was it 2/8 axis of Canada's chart, national chart. So there's going to be a lot of discussion about choosing a new leader. Looks like that's what's happening. And then physically, like all this pravraya yoga is happening in the rising sign Lugna of Canada. So this is all these people coming together, all these groups of people coming together and physically going to polls to choose their new prime minister. Um, yeah. So let's see. Yeah, the ninth house we've been talking about a lot. So Mars aspect its own sign, exalted sun, new moon, birth of a strong competitive leader, government boss, guru, spiritual leader. I mean, any or all of the above. 10th house lord is Venus. As aspect its own site through parivartana. Jupiter's there. It's aspected by Ketu and Saturn as well. Unusual objective, advisory process, seeking a guru or leader, practical counsel through sudden loss. So we've been talking about that. 11th house lord is Mercury. This could be loss of material wealth. It could also be, other people's money, and other people's money is public, kind of group money, because the eighth house not only represents deep psychology, but it represents other people's money. So, especially if we're talking about the Catholic Church, again, a lot of the wealth of that church comes from its constituents. So, yeah, that's also what's at stake here. Yeah, I was shocked. I've been to the Vatican once, and I was kind of shocked at how much you could tell how expensive everything was, all the precious art and the marble and the whatever. I was like, wow, this is like, I mean, I had no idea until I saw in person, like how rich the Catholic Church actually was. So let's see. Let's see, but 11th house, Mercury, loss of material wealth, or maybe other people's money. Income is also 11th house stuff, public support. 11th house can also be coworkers. So again, if we're bringing this closer to home, this could be like a new boss that comes into the mix. And there could be a loss of coworkers because usually there's, staff shifts that happens with a new leader, sometimes voluntarily and sometimes by, the administration, new administration. Um, and this could again also be like a going away retirement party. So this Jupiter, Venus, and the 10th house with Ketu and Saturn, like not only could it be like like a more on a permanent level, higher permanent level, like, be the, parade of people going by to pay their respects to the Pope, the previous Pope that passed. But this could be a retirement party, for not somebody who's passing, but who's like, shifting out of the position of leadership of an organization. Then the 12th house Lord, Moon aspect is zone with Mars there. So with Moon coming back into its own sign in the 12th house, there's going to be some protective and actions as well of material losses here. So again, that's why, like, even though they're indications of spirituality as well, I would say more so because Venus, it's like Venus, 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 Saturn for the dasha period, Venus, Venus, Sun, like, there needs to be somebody coming in, even if they are spiritual, and they have to be spiritual. It seems like the emphasis is more on the practical side, like who's actually going to run this organization and, keep the ship together, kind of thing. Um, yeah, and so the material losses regarding lineage, religion, institution, father, boss, again, that all keeps coming up. So let's take a look at the sub-zodiacs now and see what we see and see if we get more info there. Okay, so on the next few slides, I have the sub-zodiacs, also known as the amshas or subdivisional charts. So these are typically analyzed for timing. So when I mentioned like the Dasha period, like Venus, 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 Saturn, switching to Venus, Venus, Sun on July 6th, what we would do is we look at those specific planets to see how different areas of somebody's life will move, like in more of a positive direction or negative direction, that sort of thing. So these are mostly used for timing. You can get additional information too, but you always want to take the information you get from the sub zodiacs and integrate them into the main chart, the natal chart. So let's take a look here. So again, I've been talking about spirituality a lot. So I thought, well, let's look at those first. So on this slide, we have the Panchamsha D5 for innate spirituality, which is more like an individual, free-form, organic self spirituality, and the Vimshamsha D20 for formal worship. Now look at the difference between these two charts. It's pretty dramatic. Um, so in the Panchamsha for D5 for innate spirituality, all the grahas, so Venus, and that's what I've done is I've circled Venus, Saturn, and Sun, since those are the planets we're kind of watching, in terms of like how they're moving or changing or whatever. So all the grahas or planets are not well placed in the D5. Okay. And all of them are in either third or eighth house. The third and eighth house in Amshas indicates change or endings. Also, there's a Balarishta yoga here, so 5 out of 8 planets um, are negative houses, so that indicates like a Balarishta yoga can be like a very uh, rough start to childhood, sometimes or difficult childhood, and sometimes so difficult that a child does not survive childhood. So this is a very challenged chart here. So again, with Balarishta yoga, this may be something that never really comes to pass or fructifies or kind of gels, comes together. The other thing is that with Venus here in the 8th house, you have 3 malefics on it. So Mars is aspecting here, and you have Rahu and Saturn. And Venus is a soul enemy of Rahu. So there's, that brings unusual energy, traditional thoughts, troubled thinking, a lot of deep turmoil going on here, frankly. The other thing is this is a Saturn dominated chart because Saturn is on everything except Sun and Moon, I believe. Yeah, because Saturn is aspecting all these other planets. So again, there tends to be a more traditional bent, again, if this was a person. Then let's compare it to the Vimshamsha D20 for formal worship. So again, all the grahas are well placed, but you can see there's a lot more strength here. So Saturn is exalted in the 7th house. Venus is swa in its own sign in the 7th house. Saturn, Mars, and Venus together, these are all passion planets, a lot of energy here. Saturn and Mars together, this is like an endurance athlete. Yeah, it's like really strong. And this is all in the 7th house, so this like strong traditional practical path and partner here. You can see that it's like hugely different from the D5. Then we have an exalted Mars, Sun, and Moon in the 10th house, so intense daily activities. And then Mars is aspecting its own sign in the Lugna here, with these two passionate planets, Sun and or Saturn and Venus. This is like a fiery zealot, like deep religious type person here for this moment in time. So that fits with what we've been talking about. Let's see what else we got here. Other charts. On this, since we were talking about somebody passing potentially like the Pope, then I looked at the health launches here. So we have at the top Tajik Shashtamsha D6 for acute issues, then the Tajik Ashtamamsha D8 for chronic issues, and the Bamsha D20 so for strength and resilience. So first off, with the acute issues chart D6, we have a Virgodama Lugna because we have Leo as a rising sign for this subchart as we do with the natal chart. That in and of itself means this is important. Okay. Now, Venus and Saturn are not well placed. Saturn's exalted, Venus is swa, so they're strong in the 3rd house. But again, this is changes and endings. And they aspect the 9th house here, where Saturn is debilitated and Venus is not in a friend sign, at least. So, especially a debilitated Saturn in the 9th house, this could indicate like a loss of a leader. And actually, in Pope, I did go through Pope Francis's chart, and he's a Gemini rising. And what was it? So his 9th house is Aquarius, and he was in the hospital for about 5 weeks with double pneumonia before he was allowed to leave, and then he was out for a few days before he passed. I think due to a stroke is what I read. But Saturn was transiting his 9th house, and flipped into. That was about the time that Saturn flipped into Pisces, where it was aspecting his 4th house of chest issues, like lung issues and stuff like that. So yeah, and for him, the 4th house for him is Virgo, so a dual chest, like literally dual chest problem, with Saturn in Purvabhadrapada and Rahu in Purvabhadrapada, Venus, all these Purvabhadrapada planets aspecting his 4th house of chest, And then we had eclipses in March, so it all just kind of came to a head for him, unfortunately. So, but yeah, and then the other thing to notice, okay, as we go through this, is look how often, again, we're only looking at 3 planets here, Venus, Saturn, and Sun. Okay. So watch how often at least one of these planets, if not multiple planets, is aspecting the 9th house, which again is bringing energy to the 9th house, even like on very deep and broad levels here. The other thing is that because Venus, Saturn, and Rahu are so close together, they keep traveling together for a lot of these amshas. So again, Venus is a soul enemy Rahu. There's contention here. There's, chaos of some kind going on here. The other thing is that Moon and Sun are in the same degree. Now, if we're not looking at Sun, those usually travel together because they're literally in the same degree, during a new moon. But because we're analyzing Sun as one of these dasha period planets, that's important. So again, Sun is again a leader, purpose, career, soul, healer in some ways with the moon. So it's always with the moon, which represents the public. So we're talking about some kind of public leader over and over and over again through all of these charts. And I go through all together 14 charts. So it does become a bit of almost like a broken record, but like it makes things very clear as well what's going on here. Yeah. So again, the D6. So again, Vargodama Lugna. So that already makes this acute issues thing important. And then we can see challenges to the 9th house here. Sun and Moon in the 11th house of, again, public, and then it's in Gemini, so public ideology leader. Well, that's essentially what a pope does, right? Or like a minister, potentially, or even the head of a, academic department. Then the Tajik Ashtamamsha D8, Saturn's not well placed. Venus is debilitated in the 4th house, again, chest issues potentially. But it's exalted in the 10th house, so practical daily advisor, very strong. Sun is with the Swan moon and an exalted Jupiter, so there's a lot of speech, public, public speech about a spiritual leader going on here, especially when we switch into the Sun period. So this is like an announcement, public announcement of a new spiritual leader. Then the Bamsha D27, this is general strength and resilience. Sun and Venus not well placed. Again, they're aspecting the 9th house. Sun is exalted. It's aspected by Mars. So you've got the 2 leadership planets in the 3rd house of, again, siblings and neighbors. So this is sibling rivalry. Again, you've got all these cardinals that, as spiritual as they all are, there's still, I'm sure, some mundane, thoughts going on there in terms of potentially lobbying for themselves or whatever. Venus is Swa. Wait, where? Oh, in the 9th house, and then Sun's debilitated in the 9th house. So again, practical advice regarding a weakened leader. Again, this is like, Sun is debilitated in Libra here in the 9th house. So again, there's loss of strength and resilience. And again, these are in the 3rd house, so mental, emotional, soul changing. Because again, these Sun and Venus are with Moon and Mercury. These are the 2 mind planets, and Moon and Venus are the 2 emotional planets. There's a lot of mental, emotional change going on here. But with Saturn in the 2nd house, this is like leaning on family and inner circle to help get through whatever this is, whatever this change, transition is. And on this slide, I started going through relationships. So the top chart here is in Vamsha D9 for spouse or partnerships, and the Drake and a D3 for siblings. So in the D9, all grahas are replaced. So, that's nice. Sun is Swa, so super strong. Plus the 2 advisors, Jupiter and Venus here. Very strong leadership, counselor energy here in the spouse or partner here. Saturn and Rahu in the 9th house, dispositor's moon in the 10th. So basically, there's a connection here because the dispositor, the ruler of the 9th house, has gone to the 10th house. This is like a leader, like a unusual traditional leader who's very strong at day-to-day advisements, both practical and spiritual, of the public. And again, this is bringing up 9th house issues again: religion, higher education, leader activity. There is still contention here because Jupiter and Venus are soul enemies, so that's still going on. So again, there is this like kind of tension here between practical versus spiritual counseling. The other thing you'll notice, like I mentioned, and again, we have Saturn in the 9th house again, so this 9th house keeps getting pinged on. The other thing is that Jupiter, even though it seems like it's a little less strong, I do this count at the end, so I actually counted all this, but Jupiter is with these planets like Venus, Saturn, or Sun in almost all these charts. So it's a little less obvious, but Jupiter is involved, but I don't think it's as strong, again, as Sun exalted, Sun, like you keep getting that, Venus is also strong in a lot of places. So there is some tension again between the, spirit of a new leader and their practical skills, I guess you could say. Then the second chart here, we're going to do 3 for siblings. You can see Venus and Saturn not well placed. There's some protection though because there's a parivartana between Saturn and Jupiter. So again, that's going to bring losses, religion and spirituality potentially, but also worldwide spirituality, and siblings here. This could be not just biological siblings, but kind of soul or spiritual siblings, or again the diaspora I kept picking up here, because again this the 12th house is worldwide or foreign, remote, places. Sun is Swa, super strong again, in the 5th house. So lead counselor, also this is in Leo. So this is a platform for a lead counselor. Mercury and Jupiter, with an exalted Mars and Saturn in the 10th house. Engineered conversation. Mercury and Jupiter, the two conversation or communication plans with Mars and Saturn. That's engineering. There's a structure, there's a process here. And again, international, global reach and diaspora because of all this energy in the 12th house here. So this is like bringing all the people in together. Um, then on this slide, we have the Saptamsha D7 for children, the Dwadashamsha D12 for parents, grandparents. In the D7, all grahas are well placed. But you look at this again, you got Venus and Saturn in the 9th house again. There's a parivartana between Mercury and Saturn. So in the 9th house, you have, even though all grahas are, you have Venus, Saturn, Rahu, Jupiter, Mercury. In the 9th, sorting through again, because this is in Virgo, sorting through, and then again, a dual skilled, practical, spiritual, leader here. They need both skill sets, Sun is with a Swan moon, so again, public leadership is in the 7th house. Public leader leading the way forward or leading the public forward. But there are issues here. Mars is karako bhavanash in the 3rd house. Jupiter's karako bhavanash in the 5th house. Issues with siblings and children. So, what's the kind of collateral indications? Potential collateral damage that's happening here. Again, I don't think it's completely straightforward in terms of probably who's going to be chosen, at least for the papal position. Then the Dwadashamsha D12 for parents, grandparents. Venus and Saturn not well placed, and Saturn's debilitated here. At least there's a parivartana between Mars and Venus. That'll bring some protection to these losses. But it looks like there's a loss of a practical physical counselor because Saturn is debilitating the 12th and it's the lord of the 9th. And Saturn does aspect its own sign, so there's some protection here, but, again. So again, you keep getting, like I said, one or more of these Saturn, Venus, Sun in the 9th house in all these charts. So there's some protection here. And then you've got Sun, Moon. Look at all these planets on the 5-11 axis. Sun, Moon, Mercury, K2, Jupiter in the 5th house. Leader is sorting through, again, in Virgo again, sorting through mental, emotional, spiritual issues. But there's also like a loss of parents here. So, and the thing is, like, this could, if this is like an individual, this could literally be like biological children and parents. But if we're talking about something like the Pope position, this could be like children would be like future generations. Okay. And then the D12, this could be like previous generations, or the older generations and stuff like that. So, and you could see when you have, especially in the D12, when you have Sun or Moon, Sun represents father, Moon represents mother. When you have Sun on the Rahu Ketu axis, you can have problems or loss of father. And when you have Moon on the Rahu Ketu axis, you have problems or loss with mother. And so you're like losing parents here, which again, it's like, in some ways, I think the Pope position is kind of both, right? I mean, you have the administrative piece, the kind of solar masculine energy piece of like getting things done, like like Pope Francis, like trying to clean up, what was going on within the Vatican. But then, like, bringing this kind of nurturing energy as well. So even within one individual was both the sort of solar lunar energy, masculine feminine energy, and like again, you're needing somebody who's going to have a dual skill set, being able to get things done, but do it in like a compassionate, spiritual way. And so yeah, so again, you can see here that there's some sorting through of loss of ancestors, or predecessors, then we get into the kind of more of the mundane stuff. So, the top chart here is Chaturdamsha D4 for assets, and then we have the Ekadamsha D11 for income, public support. So in the top chart, Sun is not well placed, but its dispositor is Swa, Moon. So again, changes and endings. So this is in the third house. Venus is not Swa exalted. Sorry, typo there. And then Saturn, Rahu, Mercury are all in the 11th house. It's all about income and public support. Because I mentioned, like in the main chart, Mercury is the ruler for both the 11th house and the second house. So Mercury, especially for a Leo chart, is hugely huge. It's a big indicator of wealth for somebody, and it's kind of like somebody's all in. Because if Mercury's challenged in any way, that means both those houses are challenged. But if Mercury's like well placed, then both those houses are looking good. Um, so yeah, it's kind of the same here. It's like the assets are not just like physical assets, but like literally the constituency here. That's really the assets, because again, without a membership base, the Catholic Church or a lot of institutions don't exist, right? I mean, you know, no kinds of support, no support whatsoever, like financial or otherwise, moral support or anything like that. Then they have and we can see Sun is aspecting the ninth house again. So the Ekadamsha D11, again, income and public support. Sun is not well placed. There's a parivartana though between Jupiter and Moon, so that's going to give some protection. Saturn's also aspecting here, and again, you can see Saturn and Venus in the ninth house again. So the Sun is a little bit stronger than it seems, but it's still challenged. But you can see this sixth house is like acute issues with a public spiritual leader. And Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, and Jupiter and Jupiter is the sole enemy of Venus here. Jupiter, Venus, Saturn is all here in the ninth house. So, in Pisces, so dual spiritual, practical, traditional leader with issues. There's clearly some issues going on here. So, this is some attempt to sort this stuff out. It's still a fairly strong ninth house though, because Venus is exalted here, and then Jupiter is going into its own house. So there's some protection here around the ninth house, the institution, the leader, that sort of thing. But you can also see like Venus is exalted. Venus is the lord of the 11th house of, again, income, clubs, group, society. So it's about, again, maintaining lineage, in some way. Okay, and then the last slide here, this is a career and education. So we have the Dashamsha D10 for career at the top and the Siddhamsha D24 for education down below. Again, we've got Venus and Saturn in the ninth house. That keeps happening. Sun is also Swan, the fifth house. So, in Leo. So again, public leader, stage, counseling, all very strong here with Leo. Especially when we switch from Venus, Saturn to Venus, Sun, that's going to be a stronger period here. And then we also have Mars aspecting the ninth house. So Mars, Venus, Saturn in the ninth house. These are all passion planets as well. So passion, action, traditional, practical advisor going on here. Both emotional as well as practical, I would say. Because again, we keep, seeing dual energies, whether you want to think of it as like masculine, feminine, or practical, spiritual, or mundane, compassionate, that sort of thing. And the Siddhamsha D24 for education. Venus is not well placed, but it's Swa in the 8th house. So this could be like thoughts, research, change, or endings here. Sun, Moon, Saturn, Swa, Mercury. We have a parivartana between Sun and Mercury here. All in the 4th house. So again, lineage, higher education, traditional leadership, mind and emotion. So there's challenges here to education. Venus will bring some changes here, but Saturn's aspecting this 4th house and the 9th house here. Let's see. But the 4th house of education is going to be strong. So this would again potentially be like a Sun is there, that's career. Moon and Mercury, this is like mind and emotions, and Saturn here is like practicality, but also traditional. This could be somebody who's stepping into like maybe getting to becoming like a spiritual or religious leader of some kind. Yeah. So yeah. Then when I counted all this up, the Sun Moon conjunction that was in all 14 charts, and then in 12 of 14 charts, the dispositor for the ruler for wherever sun and moon were sitting together was either swa or exalted. So even if sun or moon wasn't particularly strong, the fact that the dispositor is strong brings strength to them. So this is super strong, especially because it's like 12 out of 14 charts here. I mean, the only charts where this wasn't happening was innate spirituality, which, again, this doesn't look like, this is definitely more of a traditionally religious type person. And the other thing is acute issues, like acute like medical health issues, which we also know is challenged. That's the only place where moon and sun were not super strong. Then Sun, Saturn, or Venus in or on the ninth house, all of the charts, so again, that's going to bring emphasis to ninth house issues: father, boss, government, religion, institution. And then I mentioned Jupiter. Even though Jupiter, we're not running Jupiter here, we're not focused on Jupiter here, Jupiter is like integrated into Sun, Saturn, Venus. So even when we're not looking at it directly, 9 out of 14 charts, Jupiter is on Sun, Saturn, or Venus here. So again, Jupiter's still important, but I would say if you had to tip the balance, it's moving more in the direction of like a practical, traditional type of leader that's being chosen here, it looks like. Okay, so there you go. So that was analysis for the new moon coming up, 27th of April. As always, I thank you so much for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. It's very much appreciated. And all the different ways that you guys support my work in the channel. So, watching videos or liking them, subscribing. People are sending in, generous donations, commenting, all of it's very much appreciated. So thank you guys for all of that. I really do. It really touches my heart. I do. Oh, and then the teaching videos. So a lot of my videos on the channel are teaching videos. So if you want to learn more Vedic astrology, check out my concept playlist. All my teaching videos are there. If you're looking for more famous charts, again, I just updated the birth chart archive list 2025 video. That's up now too. I do offer individual birth chart readings. So if that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info on that. I do also have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, as well as yoga, homeopathy, and naturopathic medicine. So if that's helpful to you, that's out there too. It's called Nature Source Care, that channel. So as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, and until the next one, stay.